The time is 24 minutes past 8.
Now, a subject we've been talking about quite a bit here on Breakfast this morning, and it's another personal story that has major implications. Since losing his son Ross to suicide last year, Mike McCarthy has been trying to raise awareness for better mental health support.
Now, the former BBC and Sky News broadcaster has joined up with Steve Phillip. Steve's son, Jordan, took his own life in 2019. They've joined up and they've met the Health Secretary, and they're now launching a campaign called Baton of Hope. Zoe Conway has been to meet them.
Two men brought together through unimaginable suffering. Two bereaved dads keeping each other going.
This has been really nice just to come out and stand in the fresh air by the water. Yeah.
Steve Phillip lost his 34-year-old son Jordan to suicide in December 2019. Jordan had suffered from clinical anxiety and depression.
He held an excellent job. He was a good-looking lad. He had a lovely girlfriend, a loving family. He had a network of friends that was just huge.
Just over a year later, Mike McCarthy's son Ross took his own life. He was 31 and had also battled depression for many years.
Ross was an incredible human being. He was kind, he was loving, devoted to his family, and actually was very funny.
Steve watched Mike give a TV interview about losing Ross and decided to get in touch with him.
That really helped me, the fact that you were that much sort of further along, as you say. Because at that time, I just wanted to say to somebody, how long does this pain last? You know, what? Because I can't function, I can't. Because
you don't get over it.
You never do.
I mean, the stock phrase that I've started to use for some time is just to say, you move forward, you endure, and you move forward, but you never get over it. You can't do.
Mike and Steve now frequently ask themselves what could they have done differently. They go over and over in their minds the last text messages, the last phone calls.
Speaking to Ross the night before he died, he said, I'll just, I'm okay, Dad, I'm okay. And he told his mum that he would go for a run in the morning and that everything would be all right. I realised with hindsight that, maybe I could have listened a bit more instead of just trying to do the dad thing and just fix him.
So when we did get together, and maybe Jordan and I went for a beer or a meal out or go to a concert, the last thing he kind of wanted to do was, so how's your mental health? You just wanted to be dad. So we just didn't have those conversations that I look back now and see the signs. I see those moments that clear as day now.
But they don't just want to look backwards. They're campaigning for better suicide prevention strategies.
Should we sit down? Good.
It's why they're meeting the Secretary of State for Health, Sajid Javid. Also in the room are Philip Pirrie and Harry Biggs-Davison. They also lost their sons to suicide. 75% of people who take their own lives are men.
And Harry, when you were talking just a moment ago about your own experience and I completely understand when you said, you always will look, you think, what could I have done? What could I have done differently for Patrick?
Sajid Javid understands because 4 years ago, his 52-year-old brother Tarek took his own life. This is the first time he's talked about it publicly.
Last Monday would have been my brother Tarek's birthday. I say would have been because Tarek is no longer with us. He took his own life. And on that Monday, it was the first thing I thought about when I opened my eyes, and the last thing I talked about when I closed my eyes. Nothing can prepare you for the loss of a loved one. But I want to use this privileged role that I have as the Secretary of State to do right by his memory.
He's launching a 10-year suicide prevention strategy. He says he wants to see a cross-government approach, treating suicide with the same urgency of any other major killer.
I was encouraged by what the Secretary of State said. I'll wait and see the evidence of this 10-year suicide prevention plan. But I think that his heart is in the right place. I think it was important that he mentioned his own life experience and the fact that his own brother had taken his life.
Steve and Mike talk to their sons all the time, especially on days like this.
I just told him that we were, that I wanted him with me, that, that he was going to be alongside me today, and I wanted him to be there because we were going down to meet with the Health Secretary.
Ross, in his farewell letter, said, "Please fight for mental health." And I said to Ross during the speech, "Can you see us, Ross? I'm doing it. I'm trying my best." And part of me believes that he can see, he knows what's going on in his name and his honour, and in the honour of all the hundreds of thousands of people like him who we lose to suicide in this country.
I'm very pleased to say that Mike and Steve are both with us now. You're really welcome here this morning. And it's worth saying, isn't it? I know everyone who's watched that film this morning, all our production team and everyone who's sat here watching this film. Mike, you're a correspondent, sometimes they can be a cynical bunch, and everyone has stopped in their tracks. And the thing I wanted to pick up on first, we'll get into lots of other things, is the friendship, the rapport you have. And I know it's a big part of your message is having someone to talk to. And it seems like this is something that makes a big difference to both of you, Steve.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I was part way into my journey, as I call it, having lost Jordan when, I was watching the TV news and Mike appeared, and very emotional piece talking about the loss of Ross, and I instinctively felt I needed to reach out and contact Mike, and we did, and we've got together and formed this bond and friendship. But I think when you go through something like we have, and you hear of other people who've gone through the same, your instinct is to want to reach out and kind of offer, any kind of help that you can do. You're almost thrust into this role that you would never want to be in, but it's kind of how our friendship came together, really.
There was, you made it very clear, Mike, about what that friendship means to you, because, as you said, Steve was almost a year on from you, and it, I imagine, can only have felt relentless and endless, the grief, and having no idea. I think you said you were stuck. You just...
Yeah, I felt like a piece of driftwood, and I didn't know where I was going or what I'd be doing, and I just wanted to know that someday that I'd be okay, that I would be able to function normally, because I didn't feel anything like normal at the time. And then, when I spoke to Steve, he was able to give me that hope. It never goes away, and you have to accept that this is something now for the rest of our lives that we have to live with. You don't move on. It's always there. But I remember a conversation that I had with Steve, and he said, your life grows around it. And I'm finding as time goes on that he was absolutely right. And he gave me a reason to hope, and he helped to pick me off the floor.
How did you come about the plan to actually
It's Mike's fault, entirely.
You're already at that relationship where you're blaming each other.
Oh, yeah, regularly.
Yeah, from the word go.
I think I ran a conference through the organisation that I run called the Jordan Legacy in December, and we had a conversation about what's next, what do we do next, and I think Mike suggested we maybe do a march on Downing Street. We were a little nervous about that. But suddenly, I can't even remember who came up with the idea, but it said, do you remember London 2012 and the Olympic torch-bearing processions, and how people with real meaningful stories came out on the streets, and hundreds of thousands of people came out? Could we do something like that? We probably thought it was a wild idea at the time, but it's essentially what we're doing for the Baton of Hope.
We've had the three dads in before now who, similarly to yourselves, lost children, their daughters, to suicide. And I remember when we had them in one time, and they'd been doing their walk, and they said, one way or another, they sort of getting through their days, and all different moments in time. One of the things they said was, on the walk, constantly, people, strangers, would come up to them and walk with them for a while and start telling them stories. And they knew for sure it's the first time maybe they'd spoken. And that's part of what I imagine when you're out doing this, you're going to have to brace yourselves, I would imagine, in the best possible way, because hopefully that will happen.
Yeah, I mean, the purpose of Baton of Hope is to bring everyone together in unity. There are some great people out there, like the three dads, doing fantastic work, but the whole suicide prevention area, if you like, is quite fragmented in some ways, and we want to come together and speak with one voice. And to be able to tell people we all have a responsibility. Suicide doesn't discriminate. It's the biggest killer of young adults in this country under 35. The biggest killer. Not COVID, not cancer, you know, not drugs, not road accidents, suicide. So why aren't we talking about it? You know, why is there this stigma? And we want to send out the message, if we can, certainly do our bit to send out the message that we've all got a role to play, whether you're, you know, at the top of power in government or whoever you are, even if it's just a hand on the shoulder and sending that extra text to your mate and saying, are you really okay? We're all involved.
The Health Secretary, Sajid Javid, obviously was part of the event that you were at, and it very rarely has spoken about the suicide of his brother and the impact that had. I suppose because he offered that personal perspective as well, does that make you feel that there is a... I mean, I think you described it as a sea change earlier. There is a change, because as you say, the siloed charity, siloed kind of intention, but one voice is obviously so much stronger.
Yeah. I think try and think back to the last time you ever heard a government minister mention the word suicide, let alone talk about a personal experience. So yesterday was huge. And I think to have a minister who not only is the Secretary of State for Health, but has had that personal experience, you know, to be leading this is massive.
What practically is going to be done?
The Baton of Hope is essentially a physical baton. We've got the silversmith to the Queen, Thomas Light, designing a baton for us, and we've just seen the very first concept designs, which are really exciting. And this baton will set off on June the 25th, 2023. From Edinburgh. It'll make its way through Northern Ireland, through Wales, through England, and come to a resting place in London, and we're hoping that's going to be the Houses of Parliament. We've got discussions going on at the moment around that. There will be events taking place all around the country. Imagine the Jubilee, imagine the London 2012, that everyone can put on their own workshops, talks, schools can put on events.
The idea is that you don't get away from it.
You don't get away from it.
Yeah.
You know, we will open up this conversation in a really hopeful way. And I think, you know, the important thing is that what we didn't want this to be was a march of very depressed and sad people. You know, there is hope. There is a message out there constantly shared by the experts that says most suicides are preventable. And we really, really do believe that, and the research and evidence is there from those that have attempted to take their own lives and survived.
Mike, do you want to pick up on that? Because inevitably, you mentioned the statistics a moment ago, there'll be families right now, some of whom could be watching as we're speaking now, who could, hopefully not, of course, be affected by this. And it might well be that a family member, a friend, you know, someone you know vaguely is in that place.
Sure.
Where it's a possibility. Now, you were both in that one place at one point in time before this terrible thing happened to you and your families. What advice would you, if you like, given what you know now and how you've been able to talk, what would you say to yourselves and other people?
We've spoken between us to hundreds of bereaved mums, dads, brothers, sisters, you name it. And I can only speak for myself. We all have different experiences of suicide. I think, looking back, I was a dad who tried to fix his son, because that's what dads do. You know, you fix your kids. You do whatever you need to do to fix your kids. And I would just say, listen, it's about talking, but it's also about listening. And to anybody out there who feels in the same dark place, please believe that there's a reason to stay. Please believe that there is hope. And this is what the Baton of Hope is all about. It's time to talk about suicide. It's time to talk about it openly and have a healthy conversation about it. The days of brushing it under the carpet are gone. and we're going to make sure that it's top of the agenda. Because if, as I said earlier, this is the biggest killer of young people, and it doesn't just affect young people, it's everybody, then surely we need to act. We need to hear those conversations.
I don't think I've seen anyone nod quite as often as Steve did just then. That was a lot of nodding.
Yeah, absolutely. Because you say, don't you, you went out for dinner with Jordan and you'd be chatting, but you didn't, it's dropping that line in, how's your mental health? Yeah, it
because you just want to be dad.
Awkward. Yeah.
You want to be dad, and because, look, he's a 34-year-old lad, he has his own life, his own house, so you don't get to see him every week or every day. The last thing you kind of feel you want to do is going out for a nice beer or a concert.
Bring the mood down.
Bring the mood down. But, I kind of look back now as well and say, what was my knowledge of mental health and suicide 2.5 years ago, 31 months ago almost now, and it was poor. And, if 1 in 4 people experience a mental health problem in the UK right now, we owe it to ourselves as parents, as families, to get better educated. I had a pretty rubbish toolkit of knowledge 31 months ago. Our job is to go out and kind of educate and say, look, there's some very basic, simple skills that will allow you to have this really difficult conversation. Learn them, because you never know when you might need them.
I don't know about anyone else. I feel like I need a big glass of water.
I thought you were going to say wine.
That's later.
Lovely seeing you today.
Thank you
so
both.
much.
Good luck with it. I know you're going to be very, very busy with planning it ahead of next year.
Absolutely.
But if it hits the mark, gets people talking, and as you say, you cannot get away from it, it's only going to be a good thing.
Thanks for inviting
Thank you
me.
both. Thank you.
It's important to say as well, if you've been affected by any of the issues raised, you can find links to help and support at bbc.co.uk Action Line.